Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. This is part 2 of enhancing and color correcting images using Windows 10 Photo app. Now in this tutorial, we're going to work with 7 images, and each one has a different subject matter. And they're all going to have a problem that we have to enhance and color correct. So they're all going to be slightly different. It should be very quick. Now the reason it's going to be very quick is because we're going to follow the exact same steps for each image. So if you're new to color correcting and enhancing images, all you have to do is follow our steps. Okay, so each image follows the same steps. The difference, of course, is in the parameters. That means the sliders, how much color we add or how much color we remove. So that's the only difference. But the actual steps to get to that point are exactly the same. Now, how this is going to work, you're going to see in the left part here, the original image, and the right part is the corrected image. So we can make a quick comparison. You can see that this has been greatly enhanced. It looks significantly better than the original image. So we'll start off with a side-by-side comparison, and then we'll start working on the original image. Okay, so that is our goal. And again, just follow these steps, and you're going to get picture-perfect images every time. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so here's the first image we're going to be working with. Now, if you never saw the side-by-side comparison of this image, you'd probably look at this image and think it was okay. But you saw the side-by-side comparison and you noticed that the right side was much warmer. It was a little more to the yellow and it looked more natural. So one of the inherent problems of digital images is that they have a tendency to lean more towards their blue and green color cast. And that always cools an image down. Now what we want to do is warm this image up. Okay, so let's go to Edit and Create. Let's go to Edit. It takes us to our Edit screen. We're not concerned about cropping or rotating, so we're going to ignore that. We're going to go right to Filters. Always go to the filters first. Okay, now we're going to ignore this Choose a Filter. Again, I've never found them to be very useful. So the main one here is your Enhance Your Photo filter. This is an automatic filter. You just have to give it a click. And about 75% of the time, it does a reasonably good job. So I'm going to give it a click. And you can see it did a pretty good job. But two things, I find it to be a little too dark and I find it to be a little too over sharpened. So there's a little too strong detail. The detail is a little too sharpened in this. Okay, so you don't have to stick with that. You have a slider bar here so you can move it up and down the ramp. So if I take the slider bar all the way to the right, I increase the effect, which is way overboard here, not very good. If I move it to the left, I lessen the effect until I take it right back to the original image. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is take it to about 30. This is something you just kind of eyeball and decide what you like. So again, you're not always forced to do the auto enhance and accept the default that it gives you. And sometimes you find the auto enhance doesn't work at all, so you have to undo it. In this case, it did a pretty good job. Okay, next thing we do is we go to Adjustments. So when I get to the adjustments, the first thing I like to work with is the actual color. So I'm going to take my slider bar here and I'm going to take it all the way to the right. So I'm moving it up the ramp to the right. That oversaturates the color, but it gives me an idea of what the dominant color is. So I can see I've got lots of green here, but more importantly, when I look at the driftwood and at the bank here, I can see there's a lot of magenta. So that tells me I have to be careful with the magenta because there already is a lot of magenta in the driftwood. Okay, so I'm going to reset that. And I'm going to open the color panel here. Now I want to warm this up. Now I'm going to show you a very simple way to decide how much warmth you need in the picture. So right now the image is cool and I need to warm it up. All I'm going to do is take it to the extreme. So I'm going to take the tint, which is the magenta slider. I'm going to take it to the right and I'm going to go to about 50%. I'm going to take the warmth to the right, that's the yellow, and I'm going to go about 50% again. Now that's over warming the image. And I'm going to reset that back to the original. So I want to make sure I can see the color cast. So this is an excellent way to determine whether you have a color cast or not. So this image is way too warm, but it looks pretty good, but it's way too warm. So I'm going to reset it. And when I reset it, it's clear that there's a blue-green color cast now in this image. So if you're not sure if there's a color cast, and almost invariably it's going to be blue-green unless you're doing like a sunset picture, then just warm up the picture. Like I've done there, take it to about 50 for both the tint and the warmth, and take a look, reset it, and you can see instantly that there is a color cast. Okay, so now what we have to do is we start warming this up. So I'm going to start with the warmth. I always like to add yellow first. So what am I looking for? I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to make too much yellow so I get a yellow cast. So I want to warm it up, but I don't want to make it too yellow. So what am I looking for? I'm going to be looking for things that are supposed to be neutral. That means things that should be like white or gray. So what's supposed to be white or neutral in this? Well, the top of the rock and definitely the driftwood. So the driftwood and the top of the rock shouldn't have a color cast like yellow in it. If I see one, then I know I've gone too far. So I might even zoom in a little closer. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is grab the warm slider, and what I like to do is just overdo it. I'm going to take it really high so I can clearly see that's way too yellow, and then I can start taking it back. So maybe I'll take it down to 17. No, it's not enough. 40 is too much, and I just go back and forth until I think I get it. And I think about 35 I think is about good. Gives me a little bit of yellow here, but it doesn't put too much yellow in the driftwood. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So I've warmed this up without going too much to the yellow. Now, magenta. So I already know that there's magenta in the driftwood. So if I start adding the magenta, which is the tint, and I move to the right, I'm going to make it pretty red pretty fast. So what I actually think I'm going to do is actually take it to the left. That means I'm going to remove the magenta. So I'm going to take it to the left about maybe -5. Okay, now that looks pretty good, and the driftwood looks fairly neutral in color, and I don't have any pink or magenta in the top of the rock, so I know I've got it pretty good. So one of the things I want to do now is make a comparison to the original, and I'm looking at all the green shrubbery here. Okay, so I'm going to reset this back, and if you look here, you can see that with that blue-green tint, almost all the shrubbery is the same shade, tint, or tone of green. So it almost looks the same. But when I go and redo it all, put the color back, you can see that everything has its own little tint, tone, or shade of green. So they're all different. It's more realistic. Okay, so that's one of the things that warming of the picture up does, is it allows the green, all the different types of green, to take their own color hue. Okay, so next thing I think, I'm going to look at the light panel here. And I have contrast, exposure, highlight, and shadow. Now, I don't think I really need to work with that much. I think this picture is pretty good. I think the auto enhance gave us enough darkness, enough detail in here that we really don't need to manipulate these sliders. But I do want to make it just slightly darker. So I'm going to grab the slider here, and I'm going to just take it left about, let's see. I can make it really dark, I can make it really light. So I'm thinking about a -20 looks pretty good to me. Again, it got some nice depth. I can see deep into the shrubbery here, and I haven't blown out any details, so things haven't gotten too white or gotten too dark, and I think that looks pretty good. The next thing is clarity. Now, clarity is a funny thing. What clarity does, it sharpens an image. So if I take the clarity to the right, I sharpen the image. I think the image already is sharp enough, so I don't think I really need to add clarity to it. If I take it to the left, I kind of dull the image. So I think this image is really good just the way it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo everything, and then we're going to look at it again. Okay, so let's undo it. That's the original image. Kind of dull, kind of boring. This is really not very good. So let's redo it, and there it is. Okay, so again, very simple steps, and you got a perfectly enhanced image. So normally what you'd be doing is saving this as a copy. You don't want to overwrite the original image because you may have to return to that. If you made a mess of this image and you overwrote it, then you can't do anything with it. So you normally save as a copy, and this is why it always shows you save as a copy as the default. But you can, of course, you can just click that down arrow and just save it. So I'm going to just return back to my program. So again, I'm not going to save any of these images. Okay, so I'm going to go click the arrow here. It's asking me, do you want to leave without saving? Yes, I want to leave without saving. Say okay. And I'm going to go back, and let's work on the next one. Okay, the next image you're going to work on is a nice big field. So here it is. I'm going to click. And again, we have the left and right. So the left side shows the original image, and the right side is our nice enhanced image. Okay, so you can see there's a big difference between the left and the right. So that's the one we're going to be working with next. Open it up. Okay, so there it is. You can see it's pretty dull. You should be able to see now that it's got a bit of a blue-green cast. We need to warm it up. So let's go to Edit and Create. Let's go to Edit. Again, we're not going to bother cropping, so we're going to go to Filters. Okay, we're going to click on that. We're going to choose a filter, and we're going to go right to Enhance Your Photo. Let's give it a click. And you can see what that did. It lightened it up pretty good. It gave us a little more sharpened detail. I kind of like it, but I think it's a little bit too strong again. So I'm going to take it down to maybe about 35. So I think that looks pretty good. And let's go to adjustments. Okay. So again, we need to warm this up. So I'm going to grab my slider bar here by color, move it up the ramp. I'm going to see what we got here. So I can see that there's a lot of green in there and a little bit of magenta, not too much, but a lot of green. Okay. So I can see that. Okay. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to warm it up. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to over warm it so I can make a comparison. So again, I'm going to take my tint all the way to 50. And again, I'm just taking an arbitrary number. Just 50 seems to be nice and bright. So I'm going to take this, the warmth to 50, and we over warm it. Now what I'm going to do is reset it. So we set it back to the original, and you can clearly see there's a very strong blue-green color cast. So again, that's the easiest way to find whether your picture has a blue-green color cast is just by over warming it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is warm it up. So I'm going to start with the yellow first. So what do I have to do? Well, I don't want to get a yellow tinge in this picture, so I have to find something that's going to be neutral. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in close to this house here. So you can see this house is a white house, so it should be fairly neutral, okay? And so should the sky, but I'm going to particularly look at this house. Okay, so I'm going to take the warmth, and what I'm going to do is oversaturate the yellow. So go a little too much, a little less, about 35. I think it looks pretty good. I'm getting some nice green in here, and I don't see a yellow cast there, so I think it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to add some magenta. That's the tint. So I'm going to, again, overdo it, go all the way over. Too strong. 75 is way too strong. Take it down. There's hardly any magenta in there. Take it up again, and just kind of go back and forth until I can see that there's no magenta in that house at all. Let's say 30. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let me zoom out. Let me reset. Let's look at it. Let's redo. And I think it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't have a color cast in the sky. The house looks fairly neutral, and this looks really quite nice. We have a lot of bright areas and some dark areas. So this is going to work all of it in one shot. So either we get it too dark or we get it too light. So this is an instance where I'm going to have to open this up and work the parameters separately. Let's start off with the shadows. I'm going to take the shadow. One way darkens it, one way lightens the shadow. So I think what I'm going to do with the shadow is go a little deeper. So I'm going to take it down to maybe a -15. So I get some deep shadows, but not so dark that I lose a lot of detail. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to work with is the highlight. Now if I take it up, I'm going to lose my sky, and I'm going to lose all the brighter areas. So I'm actually not going to take it up. I'm actually going to take it down. So when I take it down, what that does is give me a little more detail back. So I'm going to take it down about a -15. It doesn't kind of bleach it out. Okay, now because I've taken the highlights down, I can take the contrast actually up, and I won't bleach things out or over brighten things. So I'm going to take this, and again, if I go like this, it's going to be too dark and light. If I go here, it's going to be a little too gray. I can see a lot of detail, but I don't get any of this deep darks or the very bright. So I'm going to take it up maybe, let's see, 15. Okay. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this. So if I'm not sure, I'll just reset it. Take a look. That's a little too light. Let's redo it. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay. Now what about the exposure? Now the exposure is very strong. So you got to be careful with this. I can just bleach everything right out of it like that, or make it too dark. Okay, so exposure is very strong. I only need a little bit. I want to brighten the picture up a bit, so maybe about 5. And I think that looks pretty good. So again, let's reset. Okay, a little too light. Let's redo, and we get some nice deep shadows. We get a nice strong foreground, middle, and a background. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to undo all. That's the original. And let's redo. It looks pretty good. How about clarity? Should I try some clarity? Let's take a look. So I'm going to take the clarity slider to the right. What that does is sharpen things. Okay, and it also darkens things. Again, how clarity works is that it flattens colors. It makes the darkest darker, the light lighter. So wherever there's an edge where light meets dark, it kind of gives the idea that it's sharper. But sometimes it's overcompensated. So I don't mind the clarity here, but I don't want to get too dark. So I think with the clarity, I might take it just to about 15. And that just sharpens things up a little bit. Okay, I think I'll kind of like that. So let's undo and let's redo. Okay, that image is done. Now, one thing I should mention is, of course, I'm doing this on my monitor, and you're going to be viewing this on your monitor. So different monitors have different color casts too. So when I'm doing things that are yellow or magenta, you might see it as a little more yellow or a little more magenta. So you have to kind of compensate for the fact that I'm doing it on my monitor, which might be different calibrated to your monitor. But you kind of get the idea. So if you just follow these tips that I'm showing you on your pictures, you'll see they work out perfectly to your monitor. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. Again, I'm going to undo it. Just look at it one more time. Pretty bad picture there and a pretty beautiful picture there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to work on a nice lake view picture. It looks pretty nice. So again, we have a split view here. So you can see, again, quite a difference. So let's go get it. And I'm going to go to Edit and Create. Edit. And we go right to Filters. And we're going to go to Enhance Your Photo. Give it a click. Lighten it up. Did a pretty good job. But again, I think it over sharpened it. So a little too much sharpening for me. And I'm going to take it back. Maybe about 35. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's go to our adjustments. Okay, I'm going to take my color slider bar, take it all the way here. You can see we have lots of green, so I got to watch for the green. Now, what I'm going to do again is warm this up. And I'm going to take the tint to 50, take my warmth to 50. And again, we're over warming it just to take a look. Now it's clearly too warm. So we're going to reset it. Again, I'm just trying to see if I've got too much green or blue tint in there. Let's reset it. And sure enough, you can clearly see that now. Okay, so I need to add some yellow to this. I want to warm it up. But I got to key on something because I don't want to get a yellow tint in the picture, so I'm looking for something that's going to be neutral. So what's neutral? The water, the sky. But I think I like this right here, this little boathouse right here. So I'm going to point to it, and I'm going to zoom into it, and that should be fairly neutral. So I got sky, water, and the boathouse to look at. Okay, so I'm going to add some yellow. So once again, I'm going to overdo it. That's way too much yellow. That's not enough yellow. And we just keep going back and forth until we get to the nice neutral where we're not going too much yellow. Okay, so I think maybe 20 looks pretty good. So 20 looks pretty good. It's still fairly white. I don't have a tint in there, don't have a tint in the sky, and I don't have a tint in the water. So I think that looks pretty good. So now we got to add the magenta. So again, so we're going to take it strong. That's a little too much magenta. And let's take it back. And let's see. I think about 20 looks pretty good. So again, we're not getting a magenta tint. It looks still fairly neutral here, here, and here. So let's zoom out a bit. I think it looks pretty good. I think I'm going to take the yellow up just a tad, maybe about 25. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's go to our light panel here and work with that. Again, we have a lot of light areas, some dark areas, and I think they actually look pretty good. So I'm not sure I really need to go and play with all these parameters. I think all I need to do is take my slider here, which is going to work most of these all at once, and I'll just take it down a bit. I want a little bit darker, not much, but a little bit darker. Maybe I'll take it down to about a -10. Okay, so I get a little bit of darkness in the trees, but not so much that it darkens the whole image. I think that looks pretty good. I think I'm pretty happy. So what are we going to do? We're going to undo everything, and you get that. And let's redo anything. Again, let's look at the foliage here. Look at the trees. We get a lot of variety in the trees. We got some trees that you can see are kind of brown. Some that are dark green, some are light green. So let's undo that. And you kind of lose all that. Okay? Again, with that blue-green tint, you'll lose all that. So let's redo it. How about some clarity? And that's a little too light. You know what? I think I'm going to leave the clarity out. I think I got enough detail in here. I don't need to add any clarity. And again, clarity could be a problem because if you over sharpen it, you're going to get some edges that are going to be too obvious. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move on to the next one. So here we have a nice big sky image. So this is the original, and this is our color corrected enhanced. This shot was taken in the evening, so the sun is starting to set. You don't get that feeling here because we've got a strong blue cast to it. Here you can get a better idea that the sun is actually setting. So we're trying to get that feeling that the sun is starting to set. Okay, so that's what we're working with. And we're going to go to Edit and Create. Let's go to Edit. We're going to go to Filter. And immediately we're going to apply the enhance your photo. Let's give that a click. That does a pretty good job. It kind of lightens and darkens at the same time. So you can see down here, it's a little more of a silhouette. I like the clouds. It looks pretty good. So in this case, this did a pretty good job, but I might take it down just a shade, maybe 40. Maybe it's just a little too strong. I just softened it a bit. So I think that looks pretty good. Okay, let's go to adjustments. Let's take the color slider. Let's take a look. Okay, so we take it over there. We can see there's a lot of blue, and we got to be careful. There's a lot of yellow. So we got to be careful with the yellow, and we might want to add a little more blue, but not that much blue. So let's go to our color, and we're going to overcompensate again, as always. So we're going to go to 50, we're going to go to 50, and then we're going to overwarm it. So that's really too warm. So we're going to reset it to look at the color cast, and you can clearly see there's a color cast. Okay, we're going to warm it first. So what are we looking at? Well, these clouds already have some yellow in it, so they're going to probably get a little more yellow. But we need to find something neutral. So if we look at the clouds up here, these are fairly neutral. So we're going to start adding some yellow, and we shouldn't get any yellow up into these clouds here. So let's add a little bit of yellow. So that's the warmth. Let's take it a little bit over. And let's see, that's way too much. Not enough. So maybe about 10. I think not too much, maybe about 10. I think that looks pretty good. Now let's add some magenta. Again, not too much. So we take it all the way over to magenta, take it back to green. I think about 10. And I can see the clouds here are neutral. So we got a little bit of yellow here and a little bit of magenta went in there. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do with this is maybe take the saturation up. So if I take the slider bar, I'm going to make it a little bit more colorful, so a little stronger. So it's going to give me a little more of a blue sky there, okay? Now not too much like that, because that's overcompensated. That's too blue. So I think I'm going to take it to about a 20. Okay, so when I do that, my sky just gets a little bit bluer. So I think I'm happy with that. Now we have to go to our light panel here. This is not going to work because either it gets too dark or too light. So we have to go individually. So let's open that up and let's take a look. The thing we have to decide about is the bottom here. Now, do you want a silhouette or do you want to actually see some of the trees down here at the bottom? If you want to see the trees, we take the shadows all the way to the light. So that's all the way to the right, and we can see the trees. So the thing we have to decide is how important is it to see these trees? Is it very important, or do you want to go more of a silhouette? If we go to the trees, then we have sky and tree. But if we go more to a silhouette, and I think that's what I'm going to do, so maybe about a 20. I'm just going to lighten it a bit, maybe about a 20. So I can see a little bit of trees in here, but not much. So I'm going to keep it more to a silhouette. And that allows me to focus more on the sky. So I think that looks pretty good. Now, if I take the highlights to the right, I lighten them, I'm going to blow out the sky, I'm going to lose it. So I'm going to take the highlights down, maybe about a -15. I want those clouds to be a little more defined. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now contrast. Now I've taken the highlights down, so I've added a little more detail to the clouds, so they're a little duller, not as bright. So that means I can take the contrast up. So maybe I'll take the contrast up to about, let's see, that's a little too strong, I think, for me. So I'm going to go maybe about 10. Okay, looks pretty good. Now exposure. Now we got to be careful with the exposure. If I go high, I'm going to lighten everything. Looks not too bad. If I go down the other way, I can darken the clouds. So the next question is this. If I go light, it looks like beginning of evening. If I go dark this way, it looks like we're deeper into the evening. It's getting a little darker. So I can actually set a mood this way. So do I want to go lighter or do I want to go darker? So let's say maybe 5. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit brighter. I think it looks pretty good. Let's undo that and let's redo it. And I think that looks pretty good. So again, undo it. Let's look at the clouds. I want to make sure we didn't lose too much detail. I get a strong feeling that the sun is just starting to set. So I like that. Clarity. Here's the problem with clarity, especially when you have something like a silhouette. So if I were to take the clarity and take it all the way over, you're going to see right here, there's like a halo effect. Now I'm going to zoom in. Let me take this back down again. Okay, now let me take it back up. So when you have a silhouette like this, where you have dark meaning light and you increase the clarity, remember that clarity flattens things. So it makes the darker darker and the lighter lighter, but when they butt each other like this, you're going to get a halo effect. Okay, so you can clearly see there's a halo effect. So in this case, clarity is definitely not going to work. Okay, so you don't want to add any clarity to that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now this next picture deals with the winter scene. And winter scenes always tend to be a little more problematic. Generally, the snow is the problem because you tend to get a lot of blue into the snow. So you can see that here. So here's the original and here's the enhanced version. So if you look at the snow, it's pretty blue here. And here we have the snow a little more neutral. Okay, so the next scene is the winter scene. And what are we going to do? We're going to edit and create. Let's go to edit. What are we going to do? We're going to go to filters and we're going to enhance this. Click that. And to me, that did too strong of an enhancement. Okay, it's too dark, too sharp. I'm not that crazy about it. So I'm going to undo it and I'm going to do all this myself. That's an example where the auto enhance didn't really work for me. Okay, so let's go to adjustments. So what do we want to do? Well, we're going to take our slider bar for the color, take it all the way over, and I can see that I got to be careful here. There's a lot of blue, a little bit of magenta there, and there's a lot of blue there. Okay, so this looks pretty good. The dried bushes here look pretty good, but everything else is a little too saturated, and I got to watch for the blue. Okay, so let me reset that, and let's go to the color. Let's open it up, and let's zoom in. Okay, so what do you want to do now? So we're going to overcompensate like before. So I'm going to take this all the way up to 50. I'm going to take this all the way up 50. So we overcompensate. So let's take a look. It looks pretty good, but it's a little too warm. We're trying to look to make sure you see that color cast. So this is a little too warm. So let's reset it and we get back to there so you can definitely see blue-green color cast. Okay, so we're going to warm it up with the yellow first. So we have to look for something neutral. So that's clouds and definitely the snow. Okay, so I'm going to overcompensate, going to take it too much. That's too yellow. It makes the bush just stand out, but it's too yellow there. Take it back. It's not quite yellow enough. And again, I'm looking at the clouds. I want to make sure I don't get any yellow tint in the clouds. So let's see. I think maybe about 30 looks pretty good there. The clouds are still fairly neutral. The snow is fairly neutral, so not too much of a yellow tint in there. Okay, so we got to do the magenta. So let's take magenta up. Let's overcompensate. Too much, not enough. Again, we're looking at the clouds. We're looking at the snow. Just enough till things are neutral. So maybe about 20. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's reset. Again, we can see the blue-green tint in there. Let's do the redo. Okay, I don't think I see a magenta or yellow cast in there. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is saturate the color a little more so we get a little more blue in the sky. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to take it up to the saturation, but not too much, maybe about 20. So that gives me a little more bluer sky and I think it looks pretty good. How about the light panel? Now, I don't think I really need to go and play with all the parameters there because I think this has got enough dark and light areas and looks pretty sharp. But I might take it down just a little bit. I think it's a little too light. So maybe I'll take this down just a teeny bit. Maybe about a -10. Not much, but just a -10 just to darken some areas here. So what about the clarity? Do we need any clarity? Well, if I take it all the way over, we darken the image like this. Looks pretty good. We sharpen some of the branches, but we got to be careful you don't over sharpen. So maybe about 20. I don't want to push this. So give us a little more sharper detail in that. Okay, so let's undo everything. And again, we got the strong blue-green cast in there. Let's redo it. And I think that looks pretty good. Okay, let's go to the next one. So in this picture, we're going to be working with a single flower. So once again, the left part shows you the original and the right part shows you the color corrected and the enhanced version. Okay, so you can see the flower should actually be a little more pink. Okay, let's go get it. Let's go to edit and create. Let's go to edit. We're going to go to filter and we're going to enhance. So we're going to click that. And I think that did a pretty good job. So we're going to leave it there. Kind of sharpened the flower. So it really makes the flower stand out against the background. Looks pretty good. Let's go to adjustments. And we're going to take the slider bar over. You can see we have a lot of magenta there. So you've got to be careful with the magenta. Let's take it back. And let's open this up. And what are we going to do? We're going to overwarm it again so you can see the color tint. So let's go over here. Let's go to 50. Let's do that again. 50 here with the yellow. And you can see we're overwarming it. So why are we doing that? So we can reset it and you can actually see that we do have a little bit of a green-blue tint in there. Okay, let's click that and you can definitely see that. Okay, so we got to warm this up. So we're going to add some yellow to it. But we need to find something neutral. So what's neutral? So if we look inside the petals here, we have some nice light color. It's almost white. So if we start adding yellow, we shouldn't get a yellow tint. If we get a yellow tint, we've gone too far. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to go way too much. That's way too much. You can see we have a yellow tint there. So we have to take it back. So let's take it back. 35 looks pretty good. Okay, now let's add some magenta. And again, let's overcompensate too much. And let's take it back. No matter where we go, in the positive, we're getting too much magenta in there. So I think because we already had a lot of magenta, maybe we should go into the green. So what I'm actually going to do is take it more to the green and take the magenta out, because I think there's a little too much magenta in there. So -10 I think is pretty good. Okay, so let's reset. Let's take a look and let's redo. I think that looks pretty good. And I think I'm going to increase the saturation a bit. So I'm going to take it up maybe about 20. Okay, it looks pretty good. So it really kind of brightens the flower up. It looks pretty nice. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so for the light panel, I think that might be a little too bright. I'm going to just take it down to about a -10. Now, the clarity I think was going to work pretty good for this, because again, the clarity is going to sharpen it. So I'm going to take the clarity to the right to sharpen it, and you can see what it's doing. Now, I don't want to over sharpen it because it darkens things like that. So it's a little too much. So maybe clarity about 30. It really makes that flower stand out against the background. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So let's undo all. That's the original. And let's redo. And we got a much nicer picture. Okay, that one's done. Let's go to the last one. So our final image is this nice ocean view. So this is the original, and we want to take it to this. Now, we have to be careful with this because the clouds take up half the picture, and you can see there's very little detail in it because it's a very cloudy day. So we don't want to blow out those highlights where it goes all to white. Now, with the water, we have the same kind of problem. There isn't very much detail there until we get to the waves. So again, we don't want to blow out the water, so we start losing our detail. And the final thing is, of course, our sand. We want it to make it look like sand, so it should be a little more on the yellow side. So this one's going to be a little more trickier than the other ones. Okay, so you can see we have a very strong green color cast to it, and we have to fix that. So once again, we go to Edit, Create. Let's go to Edit, and we're going to jump right to Filters. We're going to go to Enhance Your Photo. We're using the Auto Enhance, and we get this. Okay, so the water goes a little bit green. We haven't lost our clouds here, but our sand is kind of dark, so we have to work with that. So I think I kind of like this. I'm going to make it a little lighter, but I'll do that through the adjustments. So let's go to Adjustments. And first thing to do is go to the color. We're going to take the color slider all the way up. So we can see we have a fair bit of green and we have yellow. So we got to be careful with that. Let's reset. I'm going to just overcompensate. So we're going to go to like 50. And again, this is just to show you that we do have a color cast. So this is way too warm. And we're going to reset. We could jump back and you can clearly see the color cast. Okay, let's add some warmth to this. So we're going to add a little bit of yellow and then some magenta. So we have to look for something neutral. Well, that would be like the rolling waves and particularly the clouds. So I'm going to grab the yellow, which is the warmth, and I'm going to take it to the right. And let's see, that's way too much. That's not enough. So something in between, about a 15. Now for the magenta, I'm going to take it over too much, take it back too little, and move in between. Make sure we're not getting any magenta in the clouds. And I'm going to take that down, let's say a 10. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, let's reset. And you can see we brighten it up. Looks pretty good. Okay, now we got to be careful about the clouds. We don't want to blow out those clouds and have it all go to white. So let's go to our light panel here. Let's start with the shadows. I think if I take the shadows dark, I'm going to lose a lot of detail. So what I'm going to do with the shadow is actually go to the right and make it lighter. I want more of the footprints and the sand to show up. So I'm going to take it to the right, maybe about 40. That lightens up the sand. Of course, it lightens a little bit up here too. It gives us a little more detail in the sand. I think I like that. Okay, so highlights. Now highlights, of course, we have to be careful. If I take it to the right, I'm going to blow out everything. It gives me a nice foggy scene, but I blow out the details, so we can't do that. So for the highlights, I'm going to take it to the left. I'm taking the highlights down. I don't want to take it down too much. I don't want the clouds to be too dark there. You can see, especially at the edges. So I think maybe about a -10. I get some details in the cloud. It looks pretty good. Now, because I've taken the highlight down, usually I can take the contrast up. But I have to be careful with that because we have a lot of light areas here in the clouds and same with the water. So if I start taking this to the right, I make the whites more white, and I kind of lose a little bit of detail. And again, this is supposed to be a foggy day, so I should probably take the contrast to the left and give me a little more midtones in there. So I'm going to take it to the left rather than to the right, and maybe about, let's say, -10, okay? So that gives me a little more foggy feeling here, right? It doesn't make everything crisp and sharp. So let's reset, let's take a look, and let's redo. I think that looks pretty good. Now the last thing I'm going to do is increase the exposure. So exposure will give me a little more brightness. So not much because it's a very powerful tool. So maybe 10. I think about 10 will be enough. So it gives me a nice brightness here without losing my clouds, without losing some of the water. Okay, so let's reset and let's redo. I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is look at the clarity slider. Now if I take the clarity all the way to the right, I really sharpen things. So you can see I get very sharp waves here. The rolling waves are very clearly defined. And I think that's a little too sharp. Now again, this is supposed to be a foggy day. So I shouldn't be sharpening things. I should probably be dulling them out a bit. So I'm going to take the clarity back the other way. And I'm going to just take it all the way to the left. So you can see that gives me a really foggy day. Okay, so normally when you take the clarity all the way to the left, you get a lot of gray. But in something like this, it's almost worth it. It almost looks like it should be that way. Now, if I'm not sure about the clarity, and I'm not sure how much fog should be there, because I did brighten this picture up, I'm going to go back and undo everything, look at the basic picture, and I can tell there's a lot of fog here, okay? So you can see the picture is actually quite dull, because there's probably a lot of mist and fog everywhere here. So I'm going to redo that, and so I'm going to take the clarity to the left, okay? Now, I'm going to add a little more fog in there, and not that much, but let's say about a -15, I think should be good. So it makes it a little more softer here, so it gives it a better feeling of fog and mist, and it's not so sharply defined, okay? So going the other way, I think would have made it a little too sharp. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Let's undo everything, and let's redo it. So I don't think there's any doubt that we greatly enhanced and color corrected this picture. Okay, so those are 7 pictures. Now let's take a look at all of them together. So here's our 7 pictures together, and I think you will agree that we both color corrected and greatly enhanced them. We made them picture perfect, and we used the same method, the same steps for each picture. The difference was in the variable of the sliders and how you control them. So this is the end of part 2. In part 3, which will be our last video, we're going to show you how to work with color casts. So here you can see we have a winter image, and on the left again is the original image, the right is how we enhanced and color corrected. So color casts are very common in things like winter scenes where you get a lot of blue in the snow, or sunset scenes where you get a lot of magenta and blue rather than more red and oranges. So we're going to show you how to fix color casts in images, and we're also going to work with the red eye, and we're going to show you how the spot fix works. Spot fix tool works pretty good in this program. So at the end of part 3, you'll have all the knowledge you need to use this program to enhance and color correct your images and even do a little bit of spot fixing on them. So this is the end of part 2. We hope you found this useful. If you did, give it a like and think about subscribing, because we always have interesting videos to help you. Okay, so again, thank you for watching, and we hope to catch you in part 3, fixing color cast in images.